This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We begin today's show with a major development for opponents of New York City Police Department's controversial Stop-and-Frisk program. In a settlement announced Wednesday, the NYPD agreed to stop storing the names of people who were arrested or issued a summons after being stopped and frisked and later cleared of any criminal wrongdoing. For years, police have used the database to target New Yorkers for criminal investigations, even though it includes people who were victims of unjustified police stops. Since 2002, the police department has conducted over 5 million stops and frisks. The vast majority of those stopped have been Black and Latino. According to the police department's own reports, nearly 9 out of 10 New Yorkers stopped and frisked have been innocent. 2 of the people at the center of the case spoke about what happened to them in 2010 in this video produced by the New York Civil Liberties Union, which followed the case that was just settled. First, we hear from Daryl Kahn, who was pulled over by 2 police officers in an unmarked van and issued a summons for riding his bicycle on the sidewalk. That summons was later dismissed. We also hear from Clive Leno, who was issued a summons for spitting in public and possessing an open container. His charges were also dismissed.
If I, riding my bike legally on the streets of New York, can end up in a database, some kind of secret police database with my private information in it for doing nothing wrong, then anyone in this city can end up in that database.
I've been stopped so many times that now I've lost count. It's a waste of my time, and it's an embarrassment, especially when you haven't done anything at all. I get stopped just coming out of my building, threatened and intimidated, harassed. I get like kind of on edge. When I see officers, I feel like I'm gonna be stopped, like a hostage in my own neighborhood.
I was running an errand for my sister in Brooklyn. I was riding my bike when I was pulled over by a couple of members of the NYPD.
Usually I'm not doing anything when I get stopped, and it proves it because I'm usually let go.
They started asking me a series of questions, none of which I felt comfortable with since I hadn't done anything wrong. When I protested, the encounter escalated. More police officers were called over. When I get a disorderly conduct summons, I'm just usually speaking up for myself, and the officers usually don't like that. I was wrenched off the bicycle I was riding. I was slammed up against the van, had my arms wrenched behind my back. I was handcuffed, had my head slammed against the van repeatedly. No, I'm not a bad person. I don't have a felony. I've never been to prison. I'm an honest, plain tax citizen, and I hold the job. I'm just finished up my master's degree at Mercy College, so no, I'm not a bad guy.
The voices of Clive Leno and Daryl Kahn, who sued the New York Police Department over its stop-and-frisk database. In related news, a federal judge is soon expected to issue a ruling in a major case challenging the constitutionality of the overall stop-and-frisk program. Well, for more, we're joined by Donna Lieberman, director of the New York Civil Liberties Union. The New York Police Department did not respond to our request for comment. Donna Lieberman, welcome to Democracy Now! It's great to have you with us. Explain this settlement.
Well, this settlement follows a couple of years of litigation, and it's an important victory for all New Yorkers because it really closes the last loophole in the NYPD Stop-and-Frisk database. A law was passed in 2010, signed into law by Governor Patterson, that prohibits the police department from maintaining the names and addresses of individuals who are stopped and frisked and not arrested. But people who are arrested and cleared of criminal wrongdoing had their names kept in the police department database, even though there's a statute that says when somebody has their charges dismissed or is exculpated, the database has to, all government databases have to be cleared with regard to the incident. So the police department was doggedly holding on to this information, so we had to go to court. And finally, they agreed to settle it after an appeals court said that we had valid claims.
So explain exactly who is in this database and how many people are in it.
Well, there were millions, 5, 6 million people in the NYPD database. And the police department, Ray Kelly, in a letter to Pete Falone a couple of years ago, said, and this is important for us to have because it helps us to investigate crimes, translates into rounding up the usual suspects. And there were many who believed that, in fact, the proliferation of stop and frisk of hundreds of thousands, millions of New Yorkers who were so innocent that they walked away without even a summons was prompted by the police department's desire to get a database of all black and brown New Yorkers. Now, that may be a little bit extreme, but who knows? And who knows really how it was being used? What we do know is that the collateral damage of this stop and frisk program that targeted people of color that is totally out of control was this police database of innocent New Yorkers. And there's no reason why there should be a permanent police file of innocent people by virtue of stop and frisk.
Now, as I said, we invited the New York Police Department on. The Deputy Commissioner, Paul Brown, couldn't join us, but he did send the following comment. He wrote, quote, "As to the substance of the NYCOU's claim today, the reality is that the NYPD has been in full compliance with the relevant law since it was passed by the New York State Legislature in 2010. Accordingly, there was no practical reason to continue this litigation. In other words, it's been a moot point for 3 years."
Funny the court didn't think so. There are actually two laws at issue. One is the law that required the striking of personal information about people who weren't arrested, and the other was an already existing law that required the sealing of records with regard to people who were arrested and who were exonerated through the court proceedings. And it was that law that the police department was not complying with. And if the police department wasn't doing it, it's sort of surprising that they didn't decide to settle it a long time ago.
It's interesting, in the New York Times, a senior lawyer for the city, Celeste Kohleveld, said that some of the information was already accessible to police officers through other databases. And she said, at the end of the day, it just didn't make sense to continue this particular litigation. So what does that mean? You can get the information anyway?
Well, you know, the 250s, the forms that the police are required to fill out remain, you know, available to the police department, but they're not an electronic database. What we had here was an electronic, easily searchable database that could pull up information in seconds, and that was the problem here. Of course, the police hold on to their, you know, records that they maintain on paper, and of course, by the way, the database is really, really important. It's just not the personally identifiable information that's important. The database tells us how many stop and frisks are going on and who they're targeting. That's how we have found out. That's how New Yorkers know that the program is out of control. So it's really important to keep the information, but to keep it in an epidemiological kind of way, without personally identifiable information, so that we can track this epidemic and not hurt people whose privacy rights are being impacted. You know, stop and frisk hurts when it happens, and people are sometimes physically brutalized. People are subject to humiliation. Their dignity is just, you know, disrespected, and it's a traumatic experience. The database is kind of the silent pain. It's the silent harm of stop and frisk, because if by virtue of walking while black, you're put into a permanent police database of the usual suspects, well, that's a scar that can hurt you at any time in your life.
So let's look at these numbers. In 2012, you have well over 500,000 stops and frisks. Mm-hmm. That's 2 years after the law. This doesn't change the number of stops and frisks. And of course, something like 90% were totally innocent and 55% were African American, 32% Latino. This doesn't change the stops and frisks. It's just how they collect data on them.
Exactly. I mean, there are a lot of challenges going on to the NYPD Stop and Frisk program. There are 3 major class action lawsuits now pending in federal court. One that challenges the whole the abuses in the Stop and Frisk program overall. One that challenges the what's called the Clean Halls program, which is stop and frisk abuse in residential buildings. buildings where landlords sign up for particular police protection, and the police have used this as a pretext to subject residents to all sorts of constitutional violations, and one that challenges a comparable program in public housing. We expect a ruling from the federal court, about the constitutional violations that are part of the NYPD Stop-and-Frisk program any day, any week now, and that will be very, very important. And of course, there's another aspect of the work that's going on to rein in this out-of-control police department, which is the legislation that's pending in the City Council. The City Council passed an Inspector General bill, a racial profiling bill with a supermajority on both. The mayor has promised to strong-arm one vote so that his veto will not be overridden, and I think we're convinced that the City Council is going to hold firm, and these historic pieces of legislation will override the veto, and that we'll have a better framework for fair and just policing and safe streets, by the way, in New York City at the end of the day.
What about Mayor Bloomberg's response, who has said there aren't enough stops and frisks?
It's hard to take that seriously. Even the Rand Corporation, which was commissioned to do the police department's bidding in a report a few years ago, said that in a city this size, you would expect maybe 250, 300,000 stop and frisks. That was at a time when we only had like 400,000 or 500,000 going on. It's glib, it's ludicrous, and you know what it says about the mayor? It says about the mayor that he just doesn't get it, that he's not black. He doesn't understand the experiences of black parents who have to train their kids how to survive an encounter with the police where they're dissing you and you haven't done anything wrong. I mean, he just doesn't get it, and I'm confident that we'll see major changes.
I mean, his quote is quite something. The numbers are the numbers. The numbers clearly show the stops are generally proportionate with the suspect's descriptions. And for years now, critics have been trying to argue minorities are stopped disproportionately, he said. He said, if you look at the crime numbers, that's just not true. The numbers don't lie. He says, because these people are stopped match descriptions. I mean, if you say, well, the word black, you arrest a lot of people in New York City, or you stop and frisk them.
Sure, but you know what? The myth about stop and frisk is that it's about stopping suspicious people. About 15%, I think my number is right, of the stops are of people who fit a suspect description. The overwhelming majority are police initiated on the street. And when so many of the people walk away from a stop that's supposed to be based on suspicious activity, without so much as a summons, in an era of broken windows policing where they would arrest people and give them a ticket for an open container or spitting on the sidewalk like Clive Lino, it's hollow. This isn't a program about stopping criminals. It's not a program about frisking people with guns. This is a program about stopping and frisking people who are innocent New Yorkers who commit the crime of walking while black. And last I heard, that's not a crime.
We want to thank you very much, Donna Lieberman, for being with us. Donna Lieberman is Executive Director of the New York Civil Liberties Union. Stay with us.